welcome back to another episode of the Dear Higher Self podcast with Lauren and Gina. We are so excited to have you here today with us. We are diving into yet another complicated topic, like we love to do. And today's episode is all about transformation and transitions in your life, looking at this from the lens of your higher self. And we'll just kind of riff here today about our own experiences just with what we've been going through recently, different seasons of transformation that we've been going through, and just some suggestions and insights as far as like how to work through these times. Because I know when Gina and I were just preparing to figure out how we were gonna structure this today, we were like, I feel like as soon as you come out of a transformation or a transition in your life, you go into another one like almost instantly. It feels it's like there's no breaks. And so we'll talk about that and some ways that you can feel a little bit more grounded through these times, and some tips and some things that you can try out just to get a different perspective on this and to feel a little bit more empowered through these moments, because they really truly are seasons in our lives, right? I know we were talking about the fact that it feels like they do just come one after another, or that like everything happens at once, right, Gina? That's what you were saying around like one
Didn't
thing.
I just learn this lesson? Why
Yeah.
am I going through this transformation again?
Yeah.
Can we be done?
Right. Everything is so interconnected anyway, right? But you think it's like one thing, you're like, oh, I'm having these issues at work, or I'm having this issue in my relationship or with my health or whatever. And then it's just this like domino effect where everything else starts to feel like it's like coming up, right?
When it rains, it pours
Yeah.
is what we're used to hearing, right? But
Mm-hmm.
I love that because I feel like that is just, me with the data, it's just more data of the universe trying to get your attention. It will send it in multiple themes to get you to pay attention. It's like if you don't learn it this way at work, you're going to learn it this way in the drive home, or this way with your parents or your friends, but you're going to learn it one way or another, and I'm going to keep trying to get your attention until you do.
Yeah. Haven't you told me before? I feel like you said this once where you were saying that you look for signs in threes, right? Like if something happens 3 times, it's like really like the universe is trying to show you.
That is like my rule of thumb with 3. I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
all right, I hear you, I see you. I'm paying attention. Enough.
Yeah. I know, that's so interesting, because I feel like I don't pay attention to that enough, but I should, because I feel like it makes it a lot easier to like start to actually look at it from a different perspective versus being so in it of like, oh my God, why is this happening to me?
Yeah. Well, I think that's like our natural default to be like, oh my gosh, this and now that and now this. Like, why does the universe hate me? And it's like, it doesn't. It's like literally trying to get your attention. Like, just find the theme and find the through line, and you can get yourself out of this a lot quicker than you think. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't hate you, I swear.
It's here to support you. It's here to support you. Yeah, we were talking, I think last time, where we were talking about how like your higher self, sometimes it feels like it is kind of bullying you, but it's like this tough love mentality, right? Like it's like, no, this is for your highest good, I promise. But also like it has to make things uncomfortable for you in order to realize that there's something that either needs to change, or that you need to stop doing, or that you need to like move into, right? And there's these different types of transformation too. That's something that we wanted to touch on today, of like kind of starting to just unpack that, because I think it's helpful to see it through this lens of like, where am I at and what am I going through and what's the end point? Also, PS, if you hear my cat meowing throughout this episode, I apologize. I really tried to get her out of my space here and she refused to leave. And she's just like literally in the corner right now, meowing at the wall. So
She's like, let me tell you
she just
about
like
my 7
needs to
lives of
be,
transformation.
yes, she like really needs to be involved in this, and I like, who am I to tell her she can't be? So anyways, but yeah, just the different types, because I think there are times where maybe you're going through something where it's like, a shedding of a past story or a past belief that no longer serves you. It's something that you maybe thought was true at one point, but then you're starting to realize like, hey, this actually doesn't align with my belief system anymore, versus like a literal transformation or transition, like you move to a new house, or you change jobs, or you end a relationship or start a relationship or whatnot. So we had been kind of talking about that, just some different ways of looking at that. And it brought up some examples of like nature and animals and different symbols and ways of thinking about it. And what I think is so cool about this is it really is a great reminder and a great reflection of like I think it's easy for you to just feel like, oh, this is all happening inside me, my emotions, my thoughts, my world, right? Whereas when you look out into nature and into like animals and symbolism and stories even, it's such a great reminder of like, oh, this is not just me, right? This is like baked into the planet and like like the cycles of the seasons, like all of these different examples of animals. And it does help you see it from a different lens as far as like feeling more grounded and more reassured that this is like part of your existence here.
Yeah, I feel like an older version of me, when transition would happen, I would feel like I did something wrong, or I wasn't doing something right, and now transition had to happen. Whereas now that I'm a little bit more integrated in this work and I understand like the symbolism of the seasons and how the earth constantly goes through its own seasons, with like winter being a time for rest and spring being a time for growth and summer for fun and like taking action, and it varies. And so once I kind of started seeing that versus thinking that something was wrong, it just became easier to acclimate to when things started going in a different direction. But it was like, oh, okay, this is just a new season that I'm entering versus,
Mm.
oh God, like, why is everything falling apart? What did I do? And what do I need to do to put it all back together so everything's okay again? So you
Yeah.
can go with the flow a little bit more.
Yeah, it's like I think there's this sense of feeling grounded even when you're in a state like in between two things, right? Like when you're going from that space of who you used to be or how your life used to be and then into who you end up becoming or where you end up going. And it's like that in between space is just naturally not a grounded space. Like there isn't, like that's the whole point, right? It's like you're in that. Didn't we talk about like the trapeze example? Is that what the right word, where it's like when if like a trapeze artist is like on the one thing and then they swing over?
We
What
haven't
is that
talked
called?
about this, so let's dive in because
What
I
is
love
that called?
analogies.
Is it called a trapeze artist?
Yeah, like at a circus when they go
Yeah,
from
yeah,
like
yeah,
one bar on a string to another bar on a string. Because
yeah.
I don't know how to better explain that. Yeah, so
The
what's the
bars and the
analogy?
strings.
Yeah, you know that thing. What's the analogy?
So they go, so there's that space, right? Of like where
Oh, okay, yeah.
you start on this one side and then they go, but there's like that moment in time where they're not holding on to the one
Mm-hmm.
bar and the one string and they're in that empty space and then they grab onto the other bar and the other string and then they go back to the pole.
There's the
There's
gap.
definitely like other words for this that are more
Somebody
like
who knows what this is going to be
professional,
like, these girls. Yeah.
but it's the bar and the string. So yeah, there's that space where you're like inherently it's like a groundless state. Like you're in between, you're like it's just
In
this
free fall.
moment. Right. Yeah, this moment of like I don't know what is happening, but we naturally crave this sense of groundedness
Yeah.
and certainty and security and wanting to feel okay. So to your point, it's like in the past feeling like, oh, maybe like you did something wrong or like it shouldn't be this way. It's really like this complete transformation of like your own relationship to safety and your own sense of feeling okay, not feeling okay. Right. And like not
I
like
love that.
bullying yourself through it of like, damn it, Gina, you shouldn't feel this way. Right. Or like, what you were saying earlier of like, I thought we already learned this, right? Like I
Yeah.
thought we already went through this. Like, why are we doing it again? And I think it's a definite practice for me. It's like a lifelong practice of being able to grounded and rooted in myself, even in those moments where I know I'm like in that space of groundedness and of transition and of, feeling like I don't quite have my footing beneath me yet.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes me think of how really the only thing that's permanent is change. Like that's the only thing you can count on staying consistent. It's
Yeah.
the fact that there will be,
Isn't that
which is,
annoying?
it is so annoying. It's so frustrating. I'm like, can't we just settle here for a while? Like I really appreciate being in the season of like, oh, okay, everything feels calm and grounded. But then
Yeah.
there's still that part of me till this day that will kind of feel like the other shoe's gonna drop. It's like, well, if I'm in a season of, spring where it's all new growth and fun, it's spring and summer, I'm like, great, winter's coming, you know?
Right. Right.
When is winter coming? Because it's got to come eventually.
Yeah. No, that's such a good point. And I'm glad you said that because that was, I think there's definitely that piece of being like, okay, cool. So how can I be grounded in groundlessness? But then it's also just like the mindfulness piece of all of this. Like being able to actually be present enough to your current experience. So then when you are in a moment of like, oh, I'm in spring right now, or I'm in summer right now, hypothetically, like metaphorically speaking, can you actually enjoy being there versus like how much of you is worried or like obsessing about, well, this is going to change soon, or hey, I have all of these really good things that I feel really certain about and really grounded in, but there's like this one thing, this one part of my life, my finances or my job or whatever, that's like not quite as certain, and then that's all you're fixating on, right? Of like, I just need to figure this out and then I'll be happy. But it's like in reality, 90% of the rest of your life is feeling like really balanced and good and safe and grounded. So it's like this practice of actually paying attention to those things and like forcing your brain to focus on those things. So then when you aren't in a super transformative time, you can actually like be in that space of just like enjoying it, right? And just like living in it.
Yeah, being present.
Yeah.
Being present is the key.
Yeah, but we're all such psychos, and we all like live like 10 years down the road or like 15 years in the past all the time, right? And it's just like, it's not
Or
easy.
alternatively, grip to what's comfortable and what's known. So I think a lot of what comes up when we start to face transition, transformation is, well, I don't know what's to come, so I'd rather just stay right here. Right here works. I might not like all the things that are right here, but I don't know what's on the other side. Will the grass be greener? Maybe, maybe not. So I'll just stay right here where it feels uncomfortably comfortable.
Yeah, at least I know this grass.
Yeah. I might not like it. It might be itchy, but I'll just stay here.
I feel like for me, when I've been in that type of situation, I really do cling to that, like for way longer than I should at times. And I will say, like, I've definitely gotten better at that in the last few years of my life. I feel like I've been able to notice when something is not working anymore, when I've outgrown something, or when it's just like time to move on, and been able to really quickly like, okay, like I see it, I see the lesson, I'm on to the next thing, like I'm thankful for this, right? Like grateful for everything it's taught me and all the opportunity and all of these things. But for a long time, it was like, I definitely would really cling to the safety and the certainty of just like that grass that I know, right? Like this is my comfort zone. And I think it can be really hard when you're first starting out to like trust the other side, right? And it kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier of like building this sense of safety within yourself and really being able to find practices and structures and systems and people, honestly, that can help you really develop that in a more like sustainable way. Because I know for me, I've had to do a lot of work around healing my relationship to safety, because as a kid, like my family growing up wasn't the most predictable emotionally. And there was a lot of like walking on eggshells and a lot of like, always needing to kind of look outside of myself to see what the grown-ups were feeling and how they were acting and what was going on, and then changing my own being and my own actions to basically like, try not to rock the boat at all and just to caretake and all this stuff. And it created this sense of like, I'm never going to feel safe unless I feel like I can control everything around me. And I know exactly what's going to happen, and everything's super predictable. And, that's just not how life is. So a big part of this work is, as a grown up, being able to reparent those parts of yourself and change the way that you think about safety and the way that your body feels safe, right? Because it's like one thing to be like, oh yeah, analytically, I know that we're never going to really be able to control this, and change is natural and all this stuff, right? Like we can sit here and say all of these things, but how does your body respond to that? And what does your nervous system do when it feels like you're in this in-between space, and when you're not sure of the outcome and something needs to change, but you're not sure how or why or when or whatever? It's like, what's going on with your nervous system? And I think a lot of the work that I've had to do in the last few years has been around like rewiring that and really changing the way my nervous system experiences safety internally, right? And like one of the easiest ways I think about it is, it's just this like, I have my back no matter what mentality of like, no, like I'm in here with you, this like loving parent figure. We talked about this in our very first episode, I believe, where that's your higher self, right? Like that's the part of you that's connected to divine power, to source, to like everything. And it's the part of you that's like looking out for you and is really there to be like, okay, girl, like we've got this. I'm here with you in this. You're going to get through it. Right. And it's just like one baby step after another. But the safety piece can take a while. And it's something important too to remember that you can't just like rush through it. You can't like overstimulate your nervous system in that way of like, oh, I'm going to just like quit my job and travel the world and spend all my savings and like go all in on this thing. And like, like it's like it kind of needs to be smaller little steps while following this big vision of, okay, here's where I want to end up. And now how do we get there in like a sustainable way that feels safe and that I can like ease into from a nervous system standpoint?
Yeah, I think I can add to that from an intuition perspective, because safety aside, when you get this intuitive nudge that something is no longer serving you or that you're being called in a different direction, it can feel really scary and really overwhelming. And our tendency initially is to just shut it down and not look at it and try to avoid it, because what leads after that is, okay, well then if I recognize it and I acknowledge it, then I'm gonna have to do something about it, and I have no idea how to go about that. It feels overwhelming to my nervous system. Like I'm freaking out now. I'm in a panic mode. I cannot regulate. Like, nope, we just won't look at it. So what I try to teach and drive home to people when it comes to your intuition, as you're trying to build up trust muscle with it, is to at least acknowledge it and know that you don't have to do anything about it right in that moment, but you can just acknowledge that you have a truth that's coming up, whether it's a truth to walk away from something or a truth to walk towards something. Just at least acknowledge the truth and leave it at that, because I think that we have this tendency to think that we have to do something about it right then and in that moment. And you don't have to. As long as you acknowledge the intuitive nudge that comes up, like that's your first best step to go, okay, I'm feeling this. This is my truth, but I don't know what to do about it. I feel overwhelmed about it. I'm going to wait for more intuitive nudges to come about how to proceed forward. But right now, the only thing I know is the truth, and that's it for now. And that's okay.
I love that. I love that so much. And I feel like for me, I used to have this like trauma response of have to take some sort of action right away to feel like I'm in control of the situation, right?
Control, yeah.
Yeah, like it's like, okay, cool. Like something comes up, I know something's not working or something needs to change or whatever. So I'm instantly going to like tell someone about it or have some sort of conversation or reach out to someone or sign up for some program or whatever. Like it's like this like quick response of like I have to do something to change it. And the more I've become aware of that and the more I've worked with it, I've been able to actually create more space between that initial intuitive nudge and then allowing myself time and space to actually really connect to my intuition, because I think for so long I would just hear it in these little moments and then I would go instantly right back into like my logical brain doing mode instead of being able to be okay, cool, like message received, let me now continue to just be and see what else comes through and feel so much more grounded and rooted in any action that I do take versus this very like, for me, I can tell the difference because it's like an action that comes from a more ego, fear driven, like trauma response driven type way, feels so like chaotic and like this frenzy energy of like, okay, I have to do this thing. I have to do this. I'm like, I get into this like tunnel vision of like, just, like I just have to do this thing. And now like I can recognize when it is more of this, like, okay, I've given it enough time to marinate. And like, I feel like it's coming from this intuitive, kind of receiving place. Any action I take just feels so much more grounded and more like I can do it slowly. It doesn't matter if I do it today or tomorrow. Like I know it will get done and it will lead to exactly what needs to happen. And it just feels so much more like calm and flowy.
Yeah, I think a lot of us naturally just gravitate towards, if I acknowledge it, then that means I have to do something about it. And
yeah,
I think that also goes back to how when we talk about people communicating and you learn, how to have better communication skills, they say don't, talk when you're emotional. Like wait until you're in a more grounded space to have that conversation with the person. Like don't make big decisions when you're in an emotional state. And the same is true when it comes with your intuition, which then triggers your emotions. Like just because you got that intuitive nudge and now you feel emotional about it, like don't make the decision and deal with it in that space. Like allow your body and your nervous system the time to expand into whatever that intuitive nudge is telling you and feel into it, because you're going to make a much better and more grounded decision when you're in a more grounded space versus just like it's just like when you're if you're communicating with somebody, if you're in a heightened emotional state, you're probably not going to bring your best self forward to that conversation versus if you have time to like level yourself out and then go and talk to that person. So the same works inwardly with your relationship with yourself as it does outwardly with your relationship with other people.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to this. I think it's, you know, and I've like just started dabbling in IFS and internal family systems and like learning more about that through my own therapy and through like I've been reading some books, and it's so fascinating to me because it's like the different parts of yourself. I think it's easy to, when you first start learning about these things, you know, think of it from the lens of like, well, there's my higher self and there's me, right? But it's like within me, there's actually all these different parts of
Mm-hmm.
me, and there's all these different, it's like a whole, you know, there's all of these different parts of me inside that are essentially like frozen in time at different points in my life and have different defense mechanisms and different protective mechanisms and different experiences and different emotions that they're like struggling with at the moment. And it's just keeping that in mind and being able to communicate from that sense. Like you were saying, it's as if you're communicating with someone outside of you. It's like, well, that's what's happening internally,
I love that.
you know? And I think like going back to that whole like reparenting aspect of this work, it's like I've really had to find that voice inside me that is what I identify more as like my higher self, who's there to,
Mm-hmm.
you know, sort of just be this like unlimited source of love and protection and safety and reassurance and all of the things that these parts of me need. But depending on what part of me is like activated or triggered in that moment, that voice like has different messages or different
Yeah.
ways of communicating with her, right? It's like the 5-year-old me needs something very different than like 25-year-old me
Or your inner
internally.
teenager who just showed up and she's pissed.
Yeah.
She's
She's
the spicy
real
one.
spicy, real spicy. Yeah, and that's been very interesting just to notice that within myself of like the different ways to even just dialogue internally with yourself and, you know, kind of how to navigate that. But that's been like the number one thing that I think has really shifted all of this for me as far as creating more safety in my body is like
Mm,
being able to just do that for myself. Like it doesn't matter what's going on outside you. It doesn't matter the status of your job or your bank account or how much you weigh or how many things you have or like right, like all these things that we're so used to looking at as like these metrics to define how we feel inside. It's like really just letting that all go and just turning inward and being like, okay, cool, what parts of me need more love and like what parts of me
yeah.
need more acceptance and how can I make them feel safe and seen and, you know, whole. And I think that's really like the whole healing journey.
Yeah, I really love that analogy of how who you're dealing with inside you can be of many different ages and types and versions of yourself. And I feel like one of my favorite ways to discern between those is when I'm feeling that overwhelming, stimulated feeling inside, asking myself, how old does this feeling feel? Like, how old am I if I think back to when I
Yeah.
originally felt this feeling? And then if I can go back and be like, oh, that's the spicy teenager. I remember feeling this back in the day when this thing happened. And then from there, once I can identify it, then talking to myself in the way in which I would have needed at that time. Well, what did I need when I was a spicy teenager? Why was I feeling spicy? Because I can feel the spiciness coming up now. What's that all about? And how can I treat myself in the way and reparent myself in the way that I needed at that time that I just didn't have the skill sets or the support around me to navigate
Mm,
that season
mm-hmm.
and then use that now as an adult.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think like tying that back to transformation, it's like that's the inner transformation, right? Like we have these outer things that cause us to go into seasons of transition, like you lose your job, you get laid off, your partner breaks up with you, right? You have this health thing going on. Like these are these like external, you know, we can debate, go down a rabbit hole on that in a second, but it's like there are these like more outside of you circumstances that are causing a state of transformation. But it's like when you start working with these parts of yourself and these different like versions of you internally, you start to realize that they're just parts of you that like are stuck in time. Like they never really went through the full cycle of the transformation
Mm,
that was available to them at that moment, right? It's like if you think about like an emotion, like I've talked about this on my Instagram a few times of like an emotion really only lasts about 90 seconds if it's like fully processed and released, and then you move through it, and then you're like on the other side of it, and there's this whole spectrum, right? Like if you really feel anger, like if you fully feel anger and like let it move through your body and just like experience it at full capacity, on the other side of it, you just enter this like bliss and this like peaceful joy, right? And it's like the wildest thing, but so many of us don't do that. We're not taught how to do that, and we're taught that it's not safe, and we're, we get stuck in it. And so I wonder with like the internal transitions and transformations, if there's a part to this of like that part of you is just sort of stuck in that process and never fully like went through that cycle of transformation in order to like gain the wisdom and the learnings from that experience that happened in the moment, and then they start to like pile up inside you, right? So then when something happens, like you were saying, you're like, well, how old do I feel in this moment? You can kind of go back and
Yeah.
start to do some of that repair work with like your inner child or inner teenager or whatever, to start to work through some of that from a more foundational level and get to like more of the root cause of why it's coming up.
I'm gonna need you to teach me whatever this 90-second sorcery is of feeling an emotion because it lasts a lot longer.
Okay, so yes, it does, and it can, and that's okay. It's not like there's anything wrong with that. That's just what the people, the scientist people who do these things have said, is that like in and of itself, if it was just like a pure unfiltered emotional experience with no like judgment against yourself, no feeling of like, oh, I shouldn't feel this way, or I should feel this way, or oh, when I'm angry, I always do this, or I always act this way, or I suppress it, or I don't even let myself feel anger. I only feel sad, or I only feel anxious, or whatever. Like there's all these ways that we've learned throughout our lives to filter our experience of emotions. But it's like, if you just get down to the bare emotion of just what it is, like the energetic frequency of it, which is like a whole different thing, right? That moving through your body should just be this kind of like quick, okay, cool. We like felt it, processed it, and now it's gone. We learned what we needed to learn.
I feel like that's easier with the things that you're processing, that like if they're not getting stuck for a reason. So it's something that's able to pass through you quicker, and it's not something that you need to expand into. But in those certain scenarios where maybe you haven't quite expanded or elevated your frequency to these certain scenarios, those are the ones that are going to get stuck and last probably longer than those 90 seconds. So it's like you get your, belt loop or your purse string stuck on the door and you get whipped back, and then you're like,
Yeah,
oh my God, like I'm late. Like, why is this happening? And then like in 90 seconds, like it's whatever. But
totally.
when something happens in your life and like you're stewing about it and then laying in bed at night, like rehearsing conversations with this person who's driving you crazy, like that one's getting stuck, isn't it? And then it's like, oh,
Yeah,
okay, hold on, there's something to work through here because it's getting
right.
stuck for a reason.
Right. And we create these neural pathways that get stronger and stronger every time we experience this emotional loop.
Yeah,
And
bring
it
it.
becomes like, yeah, it becomes part of how we think. An example I just thought of with like the 90-second emotion thing is like, think about when you go for a walk down the street and you see like a neighbor that you don't know, like some random person walking like a really cute dog. And you just are like, oh,
All the time.
yeah, like that dog's so cute. And you like stop what you're doing. You like pet the dog for a second. You like wave to this person. You don't even know their name. And you're like, okay, bye. And then you like keep walking. And it's like, you're not then most of the time, unless it's like a really freaking cute dog, but you're not then like
Yeah.
thinking about it for another hour. And like, you're not like telling your boyfriend when you get home, like, honey, I saw this cute dog. Like, it's not that
I don't know.
important.
If it's
You might,
often,
you
I
might.
will.
I wouldn't. I would have moved on from the dog. But it's like, those types of little moments, or you see like a pretty flower and you're like, oh, like, look at that. Like, that's so nice. Like, that just made me happy. But we're not like hung up on it. And it does kind of make me wonder, like, okay, cool. If you were really intentionally living from this place of like, no, I want to fill my life with joy and peace and bliss and abundance and all of these things, and get out of this like victim mentality of like everything's so hard and we have to like suffer through change all the time, right? It's like, if you really truly wanted to live that way, maybe part of that practice is allowing yourself to like be in that state more often, and like allowing yourself to actually take that with you, and like creating some new neural networks in that way of like how much can I actually be in that feeling versus the looping and sitting in bed at night and scrolling of like, why'd I say this thing? I'm such an idiot, blah, 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 blah. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I for the longest time have had a gratitude practice at night. So I feel like that neural pathway has been trained to like at the end of the night focus on, okay, what all happened today that I feel gratitude for, that I feel love towards. And so I'm spending my time before I end my day focusing on the good and training myself to focus on the good versus the bad. And it's been interesting on the journey to see how it didn't really take that long for those neural pathways to form to where it just became a habit, to where I initially started writing them down, and then the habit just kept going, that if I didn't feel like pulling out the journal and writing them, that I would turn the light off to go to bed, and I would initially just know to think through, okay, like what are 5 things that I'm grateful for today? And it's been just a habit ever since, because I was able to train myself to do that. So it's trainable, which is cool.
And you can start small with it. Like, I love that you just like, yeah, it's like you can literally just do it in 30 seconds before you go to sleep at night. I definitely need to get better about that, because I've noticed that for myself. I'm going through a lot of transition in my life currently, and it's a lot of really good stuff. Like, it's, it's not the challenging, I'm suffering type stuff, but it's still, in some ways, I know I still have work to do, because it's like I've noticed my nervous system responding as if it's like challenging, hard, these are problems we need to fix, versus like, no, this is actually like a really beautiful place to be in. And it's like, I think that the way you view everything obviously impacts how you show up to it, right? And that whole phrase of like, it's not happening to you, it's happening for you, that really helps me like refocus my perspective on things happening, right? It's like, yeah, you could view this as super hard and super uncomfortable, and why is this happening to me? Or you can view it as like, oh, this is here to teach me something. And the season I'm in right now, I'm really realizing like I've done so much work to move away from things that I know aren't healthy or aren't in alignment with who I want to be anymore, and that just don't fit with who I'm becoming. But now I'm in this like season of transition into really stepping into like the person that I have wanted to be, or have known that I meant to be for so long. And it's so many good things, but it's like how to hold all of that, and the nervous system, like building yourself up to like actually be able to be in that capacity more often. And this all seems so like timely for me, because I'm like, oh, I should, like, I'm not doing the gratitude thing, and I should be. Like, I've done it in the past, but it just fell off somewhere, and it's so easy. And I'm like, oh, I probably should be doing that more. Like, the more we focus on what we have, and the more we focus on the things that are going really well, the more the universe is like, okay, cool, here's some more for you to have. Like, here's more for you to come back into your experience with. My cat's really into this.
She's like, gratitude.
I feel like she's trying to like get into our vibe.
So she's basically like, dear higher self, what's going on?
Yeah.
It's on brand. I like it.
Exactly. Exactly.
I feel like the way that you describe the season that you're in right now, it feels like it's from a symbolism perspective, like such like snake energy of like the way a snake will like shed its skin to become kind of, it's the same, it's still a snake, but it's shedding the layers that it doesn't need anymore, so it can be this like fresh, elevated version of itself.
Yeah. We talked about symbolism earlier, and the animal symbolism and all of that, so we can go into that a little bit more. But Gina and I were both at an event like a couple months ago, and this topic came up around transformation amongst animals, and how the like common stereotype like metaphor of when you think of something transforming in an animal way is like the butterfly, like the caterpillar to the butterfly. And oh, the caterpillar goes into this cocoon, and it's like this nice cozy like warm blanket, and it gets to like shut out the outside world and just like
it's finally some peace and quiet.
Yeah, just
Don't
like
mind
sleep, just like hang out, and no one's bothering it. It gets to just like, yeah. And then it comes out, and it's like this beautiful butterfly that everybody loves looking at, and like it's amazing, and it's this like great thing. And it's like, yeah, cool. That is like one way that people can transform. And also it's not like as magical and beautiful on the inside, because then we came to find out that the caterpillar actually like dissolves and becomes goo inside the
Literal
cocoon,
goo.
which is so weird and gross. But it like, yeah, like just becomes like nothingness, and then it has to like reconfigure itself. So it's not necessarily as like luxurious and like beautiful as what we just described. But then we were talking about the analogy of the snake and the snake shedding its skin. And what's so cool about that is that the snake will have this like intuitive knowing that it's ready to shed its skin. So it comes from within. It's like this inner knowing of like something needs to change. And then it goes out and finds like a rock or a sharp object that it can like rub its skin up against in order to create friction to break its skin. So it's not even just like, oh, I'm going to just sit back and
Like it's
like my
taking off a coat.
body, yeah, my body's just going to do its thing and it's just going to like, you know, just shed this layer for me and then I can go along. It's like, no, it has this inner knowing that needs to change. It has to go find something to like literally break itself open and like rub itself up against something and do something hard to then release this part of itself in order to like become the next level snake, the new and improved snake 2.0. And I just love that so much because it's like, how many times has that been your experience, right? Like you have a knowing that something needs to change and then you have to go do something really uncomfortable and really hard and like probably pretty painful in order to become this next part of you. But it's like not a glorious process and it's like really challenging and it's really sad and there's a lot of grieving that comes with it. And it's probably, I don't know, I've never been a snake, at least that I can remember in like the recent lifetimes I can remember, but it probably doesn't feel super great to like shed the skin in and of itself and then to be like all like raw and exposed out in like the wilderness. Like it's probably uncomfortable, you know?
I
Like you have
feel
to like
like I see the
adjust.
snake as like less dramatic than a butterfly transformation. It's like, yeah, I've got to like rub along this
Yeah.
thing and transform, but then I have this fresh coat. Like to me, my snake seasons have been less traumatic and dramatic than what I would categorize my like butterfly seasons of like complete metamorphosis. Like that takes like literally who I am dissolving and me becoming a whole new version versus just like a new upgraded version of who I am is how I see
Yeah.
the snake of like, oh, okay, just me, but a little but elevated.
Mm-hmm.
Versus a caterpillar. Like I had a season of caterpillar back in like 2021 where just everything came crumbling down in my life. And I was in a condo and was living by myself at the time. And for the year that I was in this transition period, when I finally moved out and was like grieving, like leaving this place, even though it was like such a sad experience, like I really saw it as my cocoon because I was alone in this condo processing all of this grief and all the just terribleness that I was navigating at the time, and really who I knew I needed to become on the other side of it. Like it genuinely, this condo was a cocoon for me. And on the other side of it, I became a completely different person from that experience. And so I really just see that condo as my cocoon versus like, I feel like with seasons of me being a snake, it's been more like, we're going to let this thing go. We're going to let that thing go. We're going to upgrade here, upgrade there. Like it's hard, but it's like surface level hard compared to the butterfly, at least for
Mm-hmm.
me.
Well, I think there's like a difference at like a core level of like, at least with the snake analogy of like that type of transformation, it's like who you are like structurally and internally doesn't really change.
Remains. Yeah.
It's just like you said, it's like this releasing of something that's like
Mm-hmm.
holding you back. Like it's like a shedding, like whether it's a person that you need to like set a boundary with or
Habits,
yeah, habit
job.
or right. Or like literally losing weight and like becoming healthier or
Yeah, that's a good
whatever. It's
example.
like, yeah, it's like this thing that's like, it's important, but it's not like from a structural level.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like for me with like becoming a mom, like that transition was the caterpillar vibe,
Yeah.
right? Of like
Totally different
you
person.
literally become like a whole different person. And they even talk about like, they call it nesting when you're like really pregnant and you're getting ready to like the point of where you're like, oh, I'm going to go into labor soon. And you have this like natural biological urge to just like hunker down and stay home and like clean and get everything ready. And it's like, it felt like a very cocoon like energy for me of
Yeah.
like, okay, cool. I'm like just in here with myself and like, I don't really want to go anywhere. And I'm just kind of like everything slows way down. And then becoming a mom, it was like a reconfiguration of like every cell in my body. Like I feel like I did turn into goo, and then I came out of this like,
Yes.
like I don't even know how long it took for me to feel like a butterfly-ish. Like I'm like maybe got like one wing like at the moment. Like I'm like, okay, here we are 5 years later, like kind of butterflying, but also still sort of like gooey in some ways. Like it's just this whole thing. But I think that's part of it too, is just like kind of recognizing the difference in where you're at and what's going on, and like what's happening inside of you. Like, is it a total reconfiguration of who you are and your beliefs and all these things? Or is it more so just this like, okay, cool, I'm going through something hard, but also I feel like grounded in who I am. And I feel, like I think it's helpful to think about that. What were some of the other examples that we had talked about with animals? Because I know there's the butterfly and the snake.
There's the crab, which I feel like I've had many of crab seasons where a crab will outgrow its shell. Like, so not a regular crab, but the ones that can move shells. What kind of crab is that? It's not a regular crab. I don't know.
The
A
ones that you
hermit
get
crab.
like as a kid. Yeah, and like
Yeah,
you
I was
buy
like,
them
I
at the
had one as a
store.
kid. What are they called? A
Yeah.
hermit crab. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So like not the like normal crabs, but not like
Not the one that
Sebastian.
pinches you at the beach.
Yeah. But a hermit crab. So it gets to a point where it outgrows its shell and it has to find a different and bigger shell for it to fit into. And I feel like as we grow and expand, we have seasons of being in that crab energy of, okay, you look around and you realize, I think I've outgrown where I'm at right now. Maybe it's the people, maybe it's a job that you're in, a home that you're in, and you're ready for something more and something new. And so you have to shed kind of those layers of what your outer world looks like so you can go and find that new crab shell, which can be tough because then there's that gap, kind of like the trapeze example, when you are without a crab shell and you're in the midst of trying to find a new crab shell and you're like, oh my gosh, am I going to find this crab shell? Like, how long is it going to take? Like, what's going to happen in the interim? I don't feel safe. This is scary. This is uncomfortable. Where the hell is my crab shell?
Yeah. I think I'm in that now. I think that's me. I think I'm a crab.
I feel like I'm still in that season, and it really started, honestly, like right around the time that we met and became friends. That I was really in the season of like, that's it. I'm done playing small. I'm putting on my big girl shoes. Like, LFG, let's go. Like, I'm taking on life, and I'm gonna go big and not go home. I feel
I
like I've
love
been
it.
on that journey, just like, nope, not this crab shell. Nope, not this one. Bigger, bigger.
Yeah, but I do love that one because I feel like it's like that feeling of like needing expansion is such a different sensation than the feeling of like, oh, I need to shed this thing,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know?
it's a totally different type of transformation for sure.
It's
That's
not
why I
like,
love
okay,
all
I
the
need to,
symbolism.
yeah, like I need to like get out like, oh, this relationship or oh, this job or whatever. It's like, that's like a totally different vibe than like, oh, I'm like thankful for this. And like, this has been a great house and it's like kept me safe and it's
But
done a
it's time
lot
to
for
go now.
me,
Yeah.
but I need something bigger and better. Yeah.
Yeah. So then there's also a phoenix that rises from the ashes. I feel like
Love
that's a
that
little
one.
similar to like caterpillar energy, especially
Yeah.
like if it's even more traumatic that you're like, okay, this sucked and it felt like death, but yet here I am.
Yeah. Okay, that's
Fiery and
mine.
ready.
That's mine also. This one's also mine. They're all mine. I'm all of the above.
I love it.
Yeah, no, that one to me, I just feel like is like the caterpillar feels more like soft and cozy and whatever. And then that one feels like complete destruction of like, oh fuck, like everything is falling apart. Like rock bottom energy of like
Yeah. Ooh,
everything I
that's a good way
thought,
to describe it. Rock bottom
everything I
energy.
thought I knew.
Yes.
I lost the job. I like, I'm filing for bankruptcy. Like I have this hasn't happened to me by the way, but just like, theoretically, it's like, all the crazy things when it's like everything happens at once, but it feels
Yeah.
like it's all like piling up. I feel like that's the whole Phoenix rising from the ashes type
I feel like that's
vibe.
been like the theme of my life. Like when it's time for transformation in my life, it's like everything happens at once. I don't know
Mm.
what it is, and it is very cyclical. Okay, so if we've been listening to the podcast, you know how obsessed I am with data. My nerdy mentality plotted this all out because I started to see patterns in how it's happened now I can't remember, but if I go back to the chart, because there's an actual existing chart of how
Of
many
course.
years it happens, I can't remember, so I don't want to throw a year out there, but
Is it
I started
7?
to calculate. I
They
want to say it's
s-
like 4. It like doesn't
Interesting.
matter. It's way faster than when I started Googling it. I think it was like the Chinese like calculation is like every 10 years, and there's another one that's like every 12, and I'm like, oh, mine's 4.
Well,
It's
I
something like
know
that.
the chakras is like every 7. Like you
That's
move
fair.
through each like chakra like symbolically in 7-year increments.
Mm,
But I also feel like part of that, like I think it just depends on the person, you know?
yeah.
Maybe you
Well,
just go
life
faster.
is like a spiral, right? And so I feel like mine just like spirals I think it's 4 if I had to guess. I'll have to go back and look at the chart. But at any rate, it was a certain amount of years. And then within a certain amount of months, things would happen. So it's like every March-ish, or those shoulder months, so February or April, and every September and those shoulder months, big life changes happen, like more than they do in like June. It's like if I were to plot it on a scatter plot, they just consistently happen in those areas of time, which is really interesting because if you think about seasonality, you have spring is in March, and then you have fall where like the leaves drop, and like it's like a season of the changing of the season. So I thought that was very interesting. But yes, life changes all the time. And I feel like when it happens, it's everything at once. So if it's a changing of a partner, it's going to also come with me moving and a new job and something, like it all just kind of has happened at once. And so when I transform, it feels like a dang phoenix every time that I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, I survived the burning down of my basically whole life. And here we are in a new life. What's in store for this season of 4 or 5 years before I go into the next one? Oh, great, I'm a phoenix again. Okay, this is a theme. This is a theme.
We're here for it. I've noticed for myself there, because I journal all the time, and then I go back and read my journal as if it's like some other person, like I'm like watching some like Netflix
Like you're reading
show.
your own memoir,
Yeah,
but
it's
don't
like
know it's
really
yours.
weird. Like I don't know, I'm like really weird. I have like days where I'm just like I'm gonna go read my journal now, and yeah, it's weird. But I've noticed, so I am just, I'd say in the last like year or two, have started really getting into astrology and working with the moon cycles and all of that. And that's like, that has changed so much for me. But even just understanding like what's going on in the cosmos and how it's impacting my own inner transformations, my own inner experience has been so validating. And I follow Spirit Daughter has these guides that I signed up for at the beginning of the year in January. And it's August now, so it's been pretty consistent that I've been getting these guides every month, and they're pretty like intensive. They go through like everything that's going on and what to look for, and based on like your different rising signs and all the things that I still don't really understand, I just like look it up every month and I'm like, that's me. That it will tell you like things are just so accurate and so spot on. But I'll notice when I go back and look at my journal, like, you know, especially around like eclipse season, like I know that's a thing, right? Where it's like, oh, like the last time we were in an eclipse, what was going on for you? And then look at what's happening now. And it's usually like the end of that cycle or like
Yeah.
similar themes. And it's so cool when you start to map it out to be like, oh, like this does make sense. And you start to see these common patterns. And it's like, I think even just that, like from your data nerd brain, like being able to see it out for someone like me who's not like that, I think it would be so like reassuring for me to just be like, oh, look, like,
It's not personal.
right, like it just happens. It's just like part of it. And it's like, you know, I think that's why it's so important when we host like circles and we have people come together and share. It's like that's one of the most powerful things about it is this sense of like, you know, hearing other people's experience and being able to relate to them and be like, oh, they're going through something right now
Yeah.
too. Or, you know, the next time I see them, they're like, you know, crying one time and the next time they're like laughing and everything's great and everything's resolved. And it's like, oh yeah, like we all go through this shit. We just forget and we think we're
Yeah.
alone in it, you know? But it's like the
Yeah.
most natural thing in the world.
It's wild to see in the moon circles that I host monthly when everyone gets their chance to share how much similarities are happening across the group at
Yeah.
that particular time for what is going on with that particular moon and in that sun season, to see everyone share and be like, "Oh wow." And right now the theme this year is 100% transformation. I feel like most people that I talk to are in a season of some kind of transformation, whether it be a metamorphosis of a butterfly or a snake or a crab,
Yeah.
phoenix, what have you. This is a year of transformation for sure.
Yeah. Well, I think we talked about this separately, but ever since COVID, right? Like I think that because has it been 4 years since COVID
Yeah.
started,
Almost
right?
5. Yeah.
So if you're going in your 4-year cycle, like I feel like right now, especially I think just in the last several years, it's like COVID made people really get shooken up of like how they're looking at things and just all the craziness that happened and the instability and the groundlessness. Like think about that, right? Like our worlds just all changed so fast, and the way we thought about safety and the way we thought about everything like just flipped upside down. And since then there's been this like return to normalcy in some ways, but I think even since then it's like there's still, I think we're in this collective transformation, even just as like the ripple effect of that.
It's
and
a
then
new timeline.
yeah, and then and just the time that we're in right now, just in general, of people I think really starting to wake up to being more conscious and to their spirituality and tuning into podcasts like this one, right? And really starting to question things and look at things at a deeper level of like, okay, yeah, this is what I've always been told, but why? And like, does it still make sense? And does it still line up with this new paradigm of how we're living now? And a lot of things are crumbling and fading away and shedding and all this stuff. And it is, I think like collectively we're kind of in this like phoenix space of like
100%.
a lot is going to happen and a lot is going to collectively have to burn in order for like new ways of being to be sustainable and to be like how we all, collectively operate moving forward. So it's kind of like, again, I think that's what we talk about with like the inner transformation, preparing yourself to handle your own inner transformations, because we're in this time where, in your lifetime, like we are being kind of called into this like collective transformation. And if you want to be an active part in that, it's like you have to do the inner work to be able to feel safe in your nervous system and feel like, have that inner parent that's like guiding you through this and be connected to your higher self and all of these things. So then you can do it with the collective, right? In a bigger way and like holding this transformation for everyone, not just for you. It's like, it's a bigger deal than we think it is.
Yeah. Okay. So two things on that. And I hope I don't forget as I'm saying the first one, but going back to what you were saying with COVID and how that shifted the way where most people's brains were thinking about how they look at their life and what they wanted. I feel like mostly from that time period and forward, a lot of people elevated their frequency and started seeing life differently. And when you start to see life differently and step a little bit more into the light, so to speak, when you're elevating your frequency, a higher frequency goes faster. So because it's a faster and higher frequency, what happens in your life goes faster and it feels faster. So those cycles are going to repeat a little bit faster to where you're like, gosh, like felt like there was more time between this one and the last one. Like we're up against this one again. It's just we're speeding up because we're at a higher frequency. And the more that you do the work, the higher your frequency goes and the higher the collective's frequency is going. So with that, the second thing that I wanted to know is it can feel really overwhelming when you're like, I have all this going on in my own life. And then when I look out into the world, it feels like everything is on fire and chaotic there. Like it's too much. I can't handle this. This is a lot. Where do I even start? And I feel like for that, you're really only responsible for your inside and what's going on in your own world. And when you can care and tend for your own inner world, a byproduct of that will be the shifting of your outer world. And so I know for me, especially because this is a year with a lot of politics going on, so much of it feels so out of my control and it feels overwhelming. And I have to constantly remind myself that just like my only responsibility, for sure, unless my intuition is telling me otherwise, really first and foremost is just making sure like my own little world and my bubble and what's going on inside is okay. And if I manage that, like I trust and believe, because I've been doing this work for a while, that what is on the outside will naturally shift because it is a mirror, it's a reflection. So just focus on the inside and let the outside naturally, like that is the mechanism to change the outside, is by working on your own light.
Yeah, 100%. I agree. And I think when you spoke to like when you walk outside and you feel overwhelmed because you're like, so much is going on for me and like, how do I deal with all of this? Like I can totally relate to that because I think especially if you like struggle with anxiety, there's like a lot of, it's like, it's scary when you're like, okay, I'm going through this big thing, something happened and it's like really hard, and then all of a sudden it's like the news, and all of a sudden you're like, oh my God. Or you hear about other people's like tragedies that
Yeah.
happen, right? And suddenly you're getting bombarded with like all of this stuff. And I think for me, like I've definitely noticed, I try now to see those as signs of like, if I'm getting bombarded with other people's bad news, or I sometimes I have experiences with my corporate job where I can sense it now, where the only way I can explain it is I feel like I'm getting sucked into a black hole in my computer screen because I work remotely. So I like sit at my desk and I'm on my laptop all the time. And there's some days where I'm like, you know, completely good, everything's great, everything's vibing. And then there's days where I feel like it's just this energetic black hole on my laptop screen. And I'm like getting pulled into like all the drama and all the chaos and all this stuff. And I try to view those now as signs to like tune back inward, to be like, okay, cool, I attracted this somehow, this like black hole energy of like bad news, stuff going on, all this shit happening. So what do I need to clean up in my
Yes.
own internal state so that these things aren't happening, right? Like,
Yep.
where am I leaking my energy? Like, where do I need to set boundaries? What do I need to be doing differently? How do I need to see this differently? Because those are all signs that something inside you needs to be looked at. It's never about the outside thing, right? It's like always about, well, how can I take responsibility for this? And what is this here to teach me? And like, where do I need to get my shit in order?
Which is exactly how we started off this episode, talking about how the universe is going to keep trying to get your attention with patterns. And so
Yeah.
whether it's something internal or external and repeating itself, it's there for a reason, because it's trying to get your attention.
Yeah. It's
But your
almost like
only
comical.
responsibility is inward. Yeah, it really is.
Yeah. I've definitely had moments like that where I go to therapy and I'm like, okay, so this thing came up again. Like it almost, and I'm like laughing about it. And it's like, okay, message received, you know?
I have literally made therapy appointments because of patterns, that I'm like, I don't know what this is yet, but I see the pattern and I need you to help me figure out what this means and why it's happening, because I can't quite figure it out. But I know the universe is trying to teach me something. So, like, let's unpack.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm glad you brought that up because that was something I did want to touch on, is just how important having like support systems in place for you really is. And I know it sounds obvious, like, of course, therapy's good for you. Of course, coaching's great, like all the things. But it's like, I do feel that part of your job, when we talk about like really radically being responsible for your energy and for your transformation, right? And coming at it from a more empowered state versus just this place of like, things are happening to me and we'll figure it out, blah, blah, blah. It's like the more empowered way of really looking at this is like, who do I need on my side and what type of support do I need in order to help me through this specific transformation? Because a butterfly transformation might need a very different type of support
Yeah.
than a snake transformation, right? Like
Yes.
if you're going through something like a death in your family or a move or a divorce or something like that requires a different type and different level of support than if you're starting a business or if you're, you know, doing
Right.
something. Yeah, like there's all of these different layers and nuances to it. And part of that is really like, again, doing that inner work to understand what parts of you need to be supported and how do they need support, right? And
Yes.
being able to like advocate for yourself in that and give yourself that and give yourself what you need. And one of the things that I've done that's just been such a simple practice with this is like in my morning practice, I literally all I do is this like intuitive practice of checking in with myself and seeing what I need and giving myself what I need in that moment. So it's this micro way of applying it to a more macro level of when you really need it, when you do have an experience like you get a phone call that a loved one is in the hospital, or you know, your partner walks out on you, or your job calls and you are getting laid off. Like it's,
Yeah.
you practice in these moments when you are regulated in these like daily things that you can do, so then when you get dysregulated and life happens, you know how to like apply these tools. And ultimately it's just this practice of tuning inward, quieting the outside noise, and being like, what do I feel and what do I need, and then
Yeah.
giving yourself that, right? So it might be therapy. Like I know for me, there's been a lot of times where I've gone through big things where I'm like, cool, I know I need to get my butt back to therapy. And thankfully now I have someone who I really trust and love and will go back to. And I know you're the same way. I know we've talked about this before where you're like, yeah, I go in and out, like kind of show up when I need her, and when I don't, like I'm good. And that's an amazing place. But sometimes it does take a while to like find that. So
Totally.
like keep trying and keep looking at different things. And that's where I think coaching and like mentorship can be so impactful too, because you just have this person who's really holding a safe space for you as a container to really look at your limits in like a really loving way and to call you out on your blind spots. And like, again, it's like this tough love kind of thing of like, you know, here's where you're not seeing the truth of what's going on. And let me reflect that back to you and helping you to see things from that different lens of just like shifting your perspective a bit and having that container to really help you guide yourself through this in that way versus just like flailing about and, you know, hoping you get to the other side of it. Cause you will, right? Like that's the other thing. It's like, you'll always get through it. We always get through it, but it's like, how do you want to get through it? Like, do you want to get through it feeling like this helpless, like chaotic victim of like, oh my God, when's this gonna be over? Or do you want to get through it from the sense of like really feeling empowered and really feeling like you're there for yourself? And like, I'm so thankful for all of the lessons I'm experiencing through this. And like, what a gift, you know? Like it's such a different way of moving through it. So
100%.
I think that like the support piece and really knowing like, what is it that I need right now? Do I need to call a friend? Do I need to go for a walk? Do I need to call my therapist? Do I need to enroll in something? Right. Like totally. Like, yeah, body work. Like, do I need to go like, yeah, like what do I need? And trying different things because different tools are going to benefit you in different ways at different points of your life. So it's
goes
like
back to what you were saying about practicing in a regulated state when things are going well. So like build your tool belt up of, oh, this is how this one feels and this is how this works and this is how it makes me feel. So then when it all goes south, you're like, this tool, I know that is what I need right now because it makes me feel this way on it. I need this tool and I need this person. Go.
Yeah. Yeah. And literally writing it down. Like I have a list on my phone of things that make me feel better. And it's in my notes app. And I also will categorize it by like, if you're feeling anxious, do this, you know, if you're feeling anxious, your body's calling for a different type of energy than if you're feeling like depressed, you know, if you're in like fight or flight versus if you're in like complete freeze mode, like it's different nervous systems being activated and it needs a different response. So it's like, do you need to go work out or do you need to like sit in a swing and like read a book or hum or like, you know, like there's different ways of going about it. And so sometimes I have to actually, I like write it down and I have a list because when you're in that moment, sometimes it can feel really hard to just reach for help. Like you're in this place of like, ugh, why am I here again? Especially when it's like the rock bottom type shit, right? And you're just like, it's not as easy just being like, cool, I'm going to see this as an opportunity for growth.
Yeah.
Love this for me. Like, no.
Yoga class, everything will be better in an hour.
Let me book Reiki and I will feel better. Like, it's like, no, bitch, like, that's not how this works. Like, when you're in bed for like 3 days straight and everything's collapsing around you, like, you don't just remember this stuff. Like, it's not easily accessible. So you have to like make systems for yourself that you can call to when you need them. And what's worked for me is like, I have notes in my phone of like, here's stuff to do. Here are people you can call, you know, here are your like 3 good friends that you can always know. You can just like call them, be like, hey, I need to.
Of, like the list that a parent would leave for a babysitter. Like, here are all the emergency numbers. Like, here are the allergies.
Yes. But again, being the inner parent, right? Like being like your higher self is your inner parent. And you get to do that for yourself now. Like, yeah, you do get to like leave an instruction manual for yourself of like, hey, I know you're like slipping into like 12-year-old depressed.
You write yourself a love note in your notes. You're like, hey girl, I know things are rough. Here's a list of all the modalities that you could call upon.
Okay, so like that's actually what I was going to say in this next part, because not only do I have a note for things to do, but I also write myself notes when I'm feeling really good that are intentionally for when I feel bad. Like, they're notes that I write to myself that I know, like, hey, everything's working out right now, or like I feel, like I feel really good and things are going well, and like, wow, what a great day we had. And I'll like take time to just spend 5 minutes to like write a note to that version of myself that I know I'll get to eventually, who needs this reminder. Yeah, it's like, hey, like, just remember. And you can leave like voice notes to yourself too. I've done that before where I record, like, I'll be like, hey, I just want to like, I want you to remember, because you're going to forget, but like things are actually okay. and you're going to be fine. And like, you're going to get through this. And you have a lot of
That's
good
so
things
cute.
going on.
That really is the epitome, though, of being in relationship with yourself and loving yourself. And I think that that changes the game entirely when you start approaching life and the relationship with yourself in that way. Because we don't think about that. We're not taught that. You get taught how to have relationships with other people and how to make friends and how to be a daughter and a sister and a mother. But how to be in relationship with yourself is not something we ever get taught. And I think that is such a great set of examples of how to be in relationship with yourself.
Yeah.
Because like we were saying earlier in the episode, there's so many versions of you in there, and all those different parts of you need attention in different ways.
And it's just like holding yourself through your transformation, because it's going to happen over and over and over and over and over again. And it's really your choice. Like I just said a little bit ago, it's like, yeah, you can do it in a way where you're kind of like self-abandoning and like hating every step of the way and just sort of like disconnected from yourself, or you can do it from this place of like really being rooted to your higher self and like really feeling held and guided and supported and trusting. And and like I said, it's like the more you practice that on small levels, the more it will get embedded in you. So then when the big things happen, you're able to approach it from a different way. And I think there's some quote, I don't remember who said it, but it was like, you can either change through pain and suffering, or you can change through joy. And it's like, it's like, we're going to change no matter what. Like you said earlier, it's like change is the only thing that's inevitable. So it's like, we're going to change no matter what. You're going to get older. People are going to come in and out of your life. Your jobs are going to change. Like your money situation is going to change. Your body's going to change. Like we know this.
People
So it's
around
like,
you.
yeah. So it's like, you can either do it through this
You can kick and
suffering.
scream the whole time, or
Yeah.
you
This
can
like,
get in the driver's seat.
exactly. And it's like, I think the story so many of us have been taught is, yeah, change is hard. It's hard. You got to work really hard. You just deal with it, figure it out, but it's like, what if there's a different story? What if it could be fun and like actually really liberating, and it could actually be like the medicine that you need in order to be who you're supposed to be and who your soul wants to be, and like who your higher self has been trying so lovingly and so directly to get you to become. And I just think that transformation is like the way that we do that. It's like the process through which we become that part of ourselves. And you get to decide like how you want to show up for yourself in that.
Yeah. Love it.
Yeah. So I know we talked about support and how important that is. The community piece is also really, really key. Like we touched on earlier, we lead circles and we work with women in groups. And what's so powerful about that is hearing where other people are at and the similarities. And like Gina was saying, the fact that even to the different, things going on with the moon and all of that, it's like so synced. And so having people in your corner who you can really gravitate towards is so important to help you with this work, and being able to feel like you're not alone in it, and that you have people to mirror back to you your truths when you forget them, and all of that. It's so key.
Yeah. So I'm curious how everybody is feeling in their season of transformation right now, if they're in one, and what symbolic animal they resonate with. If you feel like you're in your crab season, or your phoenix season, or your snake season, butterfly, we have a free community over at dearhigherself.me where you can join us if you're not already part of the community. But let us know if you are in a season of transformation and what animal you are resonating with. We'll be sharing ours in the comments there, and just really curious to hear how everyone's navigating it. So that's our free community over at dearhigherself.me, and subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already. We've got episodes that come out every other week, and we will see you in the next one.